Another week has passed, which means we got a couple of new cards to talk about in this weekly roundup.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today we do the weekly roundup where we take a look at all the new cards that were revealed for the Card of the Day reveals in said week. And this week, most of the cards weren't really that special, but there were a couple of outliers that bring something unique to their respective playstyle that could potentially show the beginning of a new sub-archetype within that deck. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into these cards and see what we got for the new Grade 5 nations. And we started with the reveals on Monday, which were two new cards for Stoi-kaya. And for Stoi-kaya we got this brand new Grade 2 unit called Fleet Eater, and this card has the ability Auto Rigid Circle. When this unit attacks, if you Alchemagic an order this turn, costs Soul Blast 1. Until the end of the battle, this unit gets power plus 5k, and when your opponent would call cards from their hand to the Guardian Circle, they must call 2 or more at the same time. So basically, this is a conditional Battledore effect that gives the unit extra power, thus making it able to hit the Vanguard on its own without needing a booster. Now overall, I'm not too keen on this card because Zorga can easily build bigger columns that in themselves would already demand 2 cards from your opponent's hand. This could be a tech option depending on your scenario, because this could be useful in a situation where you cannot build a board, you can only build front row attackers and you cannot even power them up. Then at the very least you have this potential option to still pressure your opponent by forcing at least 2 cards from the hand from one attack, if they are of course at 5 damage. But then if we take a look at the second card for Stoi-kaya, we got a very interesting card that could change things up a little bit for Zorga, as we got Overcoming the Unnatural Death, which is a grade 1 normal order. And this order's ability reads as follows: play this with, cost Counterblast 1, bind this card, choose up to 2 orders from your drop and put them into your hand. So this card gives you recursions of your orders from your drops into your hand, which is a little bit different than Alchemagic, because yes, Alchemagic also allows you to reuse these orders again, but in order to even activate Alchemagic, you need to be able to use an order from your hand. And if you don't have any orders left in your hand, this is a nice way to replenish those resources. So you could potentially use this as an Alchemagic target if you use the last order in your hand to then replenish them to get 2 more orders in your hand, thus allowing you to do 2 more turns of Alchemagic plays, and you need to be able to do that to get consistent value out of Zorga. Now there are 2 important things to keep in mind with this order. First off, this card binds itself, so if you're gonna play this with Alchemagic and this is the card you play from hand, it doesn't go to the drop zone, so you're not able to use it twice. So you need to keep in mind you're not able to reuse this. Another thing is that because this card get 2 orders from your drop zone into your hand, it means that you need to have at least 4 order cards in your drop zone if this is a target for your Alchemagic, because it itself is 1 order in your drop. You need 2 others in your drop as well to then get 2 cards from the drop into your hand, but you need that 4th one to be able to use the Alchemagic mechanic next turn if you're gonna play one of the order cards from your hand, because if you only had 3 and now you lose this card from your drop and you get the other 2 in your hand, yes, you have another order card in your hand, but you have no card in the drop zone to even Alchemagic in the first place. So there are some restrictions to this card to actively use it efficiently, which means this probably won't be a 3-off or a 4-off staple, but I can definitely see this being used as a one-off tech card for Zorga for those scenarios where the game is going on quite a while, you run out of all orders, you have only 1 order left in your hand, and you know you won't win this game on this turn. Or maybe it's mid-game, but you for some reason milled all your orders in the early game, thus you know that you won't have a lot of other options left. If you play this card as a one-off, you at least can get 2 more turns out of Alchemagic in that game, which can help you to overcome your opponent. And also another important thing is that it allows you to fetch back blitz orders. So that's another option for this card if you want to go for a different approach. But then if we go over to Tuesday, we see 2 new cards for Brandgate, and one of those cards is Aurora Battle Princess Billet Canary, which is a brand new grade 2 unit for the nation. And her ability reads as: Auto, when this unit is placed on the rearguard circle, choose one of your opponent's imprisoned cards in your prison and put it into your opponent's drop. So now you give the imprisoned mechanic a pseudo retire option. And this is actually really great because it allows you to counter certain cards or specific strategies. And a great combo with this card is the grade 2 of the right line Reset Pink, because usually your opponent gets grade 3s in their imprisoned card, or maybe if you're up against Bastion, they might use their facade because they know next turn they can get it out of the prison and then you can never get it back into their prison, thus playing around your mechanic. But now that this card exists, they cannot easily do that, because if they give you facade off the right line, you can call this thing immediately to the field and then send it to the drop zone, and that player just lost one of their facades to your mechanic, which can be really good. It's also another option against Overdress. If you target one of their Overdress cards and now Trickstar is in your prison, you could potentially just send Trickstar back to their drop zone. Yes, they can get it back with Nirvana, but keep in mind, they could also just get the Trickstar back for just a Soul Blast. And they might not even use Soul that much, so then you can ask yourself, do I want them to use one Soul, or do I want them to use a card from their hand to get Trickstar back onto the field? Probably the card from hand is the better option in some scenarios. But if we go over to the second card for Brandgate, we see a brand new grade 1, which is Aurora Battle Princess Whopper Prune. And this is another resource card, as her ability is auto. When this unit is placed in a rearguard circle, if 5 or more of your opponent's cards are imprisoned in your prison, counter charge 1 or soul charge free. So this is somewhat similar to Bulbamine, as it gives you either one of the resources. The only difference is that Bulbamine gives you both 1/1. But you need to sacrifice a card to do it. This card stays on the board, so you can still use it for boost, but you can only get 1 counter charge or free soul. Now, yes, the condition can be harsh, but with the latest support, getting 5 cards in your prison might not be as hard as you think, especially with the latest reveals in set 2. And at the same time, this could be a nice counter in a mirror match, because your opponent doesn't want to imprison this card, as you are going to give your opponent free resources throughout the entirety of the game. So this could be a counter to the mirror, but it all comes down to how you're going to build your deck and if this card is actually going to be useful. But at the very least, if you couldn't pick up a Bulbamine because it's getting too expensive, we have another solution in set 2. Now for Wednesday, we got 2 new cards for Dark States, and one of those cards is a brand new grade 3 Diabolus Attacker Irving. And it has the ability auto on Vanguard to Rearguard Circle. When this unit attacks a Vanguard, costs Soulless 1, and this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of that battle. If you are in Final Rush, it gets plus 15k instead of plus 5k. So this is a card that's somewhat similar to Time Visioning Fist Colossus. However, I don't think this card is good enough to even replace the card. I think it's worse than Time Visioning Fist Colossus, because first off, this card costs soul. Yes, you can use the ability on turn 3 and you can call it in the early game and not be punished, unlike Visioning Colossus that has an on-place effect. But because this card costs soul and Time Visioning Fist Colossus actually generates soul, that's a big difference in the amount of soul you are losing, because that's a difference of 2 by just using it once. But then we get to the issue that the power only stays for the battle. So if you are in Final Rush and you're gonna restand this unit, you need to use 2 soul to get the plus 15k for both attacks. And if you have 2 on the front row, that's 4 soul to even get the value you want, whereas 2 Time Visioning Fist Colossus actually generate you 2 soul while you're doing it. And we also have, of course, Marjorie, which is a little bit less powerful, but actually gives you even more value. So I don't think this card is any useful. Maybe it's for players that want to play the deck on a budget because it's just a common, but in sake of the power level of the deck itself in the meta, this is, in my opinion, a wasted card. But a card that isn't that is another grade 3, which is Special Violence Yell, but this is a brand new grade 3 Blitz Order. With the ability, choose a Diabolus Violence Bruise on your Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, and it gets power plus 20k until the end of that battle. So we've seen this exact same order for the other archetypes as well. It's a nice option to get even more shield for the respective deck. No, it's not a power creep version of the already existing 15k shield Blitz Order, because those are more generic. This is very specific to only Bruce, but if you're gonna play Bruce, you probably want to use this order, because 20k shield together with the brand new 20k front triggers give a lot of extra shield value to your deck, which can help you to survive into your late turns, and the longer Bruce stays alive, the more dangerous he becomes. Now then, for Thursday, we got 2 new Keter Sanctuary card reveals for the Sorceress archetype, and one of those cards is this RR grade 1 Diamond Sorceress, and her ability is auto. When this unit is placed on the rearguard circle from hand, if your Vanguard is Hexor or Sorceress or Pentagleam Sorceress, aka the grade 3 or the grade 2 of the right line, cost, count plus 1, and discard a card from your hand. Look at the 2 cards from the top of your deck, choose up to 2 unit cards from among them, call them to the rearguard circle, and put the rest on the top of your deck in any order. Basically, for the cost of 2 cards, because yes, count plus 1 is equal to 1 card, so you could say the cost is 2 cards, you can potentially call 2 cards from the top of your deck or stack the deck. However, I do have some issue with this card because yes, you can stack your deck and you can potentially call a card, but in most scenarios, if you stack the deck with this card, you probably were already going to drive check the trigger anyways. Thus, you're wasting a counterblast for absolutely nothing. And in order to get value of this card, you have to call both units. And it's very RNG to know what you're going to call off of it, which is kind of iffy. Now, there might be some synergy with units that you can call in the early game because you can use it on turn 2 and potentially call a grade 3 to the field, or maybe 2 grade 3s or other very powerful grade 2s. But the problem right now is that most of Keter Sanctuary rearguards, even their grade 3s, are actually very underwhelming if you aren't Bastion. And spoiler alert, when you play this card, you aren't Bastion. So that's my issue that I have with this card in the current stage of the Sorceress archetype, but with better rearguards, with powerful beaters or other cards that have more beneficial effects within the archetype, this card could actually become a lot better and justify the counterblast cost, because currently there are a lot of powerful counterblasting skills that we need to use in the Sorceress archetype, for example, the grade 3 that can restand. Thus, I don't really see the value of this particular counterblast skill unless we get more resource management options and more resource enablers, like the next card, for example, which is Octoward Sorceress, a brand new grade 3 unit with some resource options, because her skill is, although a rearguard circle, when your drive check reveals a trigger unit, if your Vanguard is Hexor or Sorceress, cost, retire this unit and countercharge 1 or soul charge 1. So it's basically a free counterblast or a free soul charge. Yes, you lose this card, but I don't think that's the biggest issue because you're probably not going to use her attacker, as you have better units in the front row, like the grade 3 that can restand herself. But in the off chance that you need to call her in the front row, you can just do that and afterwards you retire itself, thus making it impossible for your opponent to damage deny you, as you have less rearguards in the front row to even attack into. So there are those options. But that's just the generic sense. There are actually some combo potential with this particular card. One such a thing is with the brand new grade 3 in this set for Keter Sanctuary, which allows you to call her to the field if she's being drive checked, and you can only call her to an open rearguard circle. So you can have her in the front row, attack with her, then retire her the moment you hit a trigger, and then if you drive check the grade 3, you can immediately call her to that circle. Now you might think to yourself, hold on a moment, how are you supposed to consistently get that off? That means you need to specifically hit a trigger and then that specific grade 3. Keep in mind, we play Hexor Sorceress with these cards, which means that you can manipulate the top deck, you see the grade 3, you leave it on top, then you use the Persona Ride ability of Hexor Sorceress and stack a crit or a front from your hand on the top of your deck, which means you will hit a trigger, retire this grade 3, and then you hit the grade 3 to call to the field. And even if that's not the case, that particular grade 3 can also be called to the back row and be used as a booster, thus being a bit more flexible if you cannot set that combo off. And of course, this card can be used with the restand Lepistos, because if you have 2 Lepistos in the front row, to restand them both, you need to use 4 counterblasts. But if we have 2 of these grade 3s or 1 of these grade 3s and a grade 1 that can countercharge for 2 soul blasts, you can attack with your Lepistos, then attack with your Vanguard, hit a trigger, you counterblast 1, restand a Lepisto, then use both the resource units to generate 2 counterblasts, and then restand the other Lepisto with the new 2 counterblasts that you just generated, thus being able to dish out 5 attacks without needing to waste a lot of counterblasts in the process. So depending on your playstyle and which direction you want to take the deck, this card could actually be pretty beneficial because it's a lot less restricted in the way that it generates the resources. But that said, we have one more nation to go over, and those are the Friday reveals, and of course that's Dragon Empire. And for Dragon Empire we got a brand new grade 1 double R, which is Stealth Dragon Tagochirashi. Tagochirashi has the ability, although when this card is discarded from your hand during your turn, you may put this card into your soul. Now overall, I'm not too excited about this card because this is a very specific condition. There are only 2 specific ways that you can activate this skill. Discarding it with the right deck, which is okay, or you need to use Nirvana's discard ability to get Trickster to the field. There aren't really any ways for Eugene to benefit of this, and I think Eugene benefits from this more because it actually can use the soul to some extent, but it doesn't have consistent discard options from I remember, does make it harder to actually use this, not in Nirvana's case. There might be something to say for this, because you have Verena that can Soul Blast 2 to retire something, and with another Soul Charge engine like this, you can actually facilitate that while also having the Soul Blast cost for your right line. But I don't think that's good enough to justify this card at this current stage, especially with Nirvana, which being a more aggro playstyle, and sacrificing a great one spot that could have been your 10k boosters or just a 10k attacker in the early game. I don't know if that's actually worth it, because the issue with this card is that you need to keep it in your hand. You cannot discard it for your PGs, you cannot guard with it. The idea is that you are going to discard it for your Nirvana ability or for your right deck, which is very specific. If at the very least this card could be triggered during your opponent's turn, aka discarding it for a perfect guard, then I would be more on board of saying this card is actually pretty useful, as at the very least it's much easier to facilitate this effect. But sadly that's not the case. However, even though Nirvana and only Verena can use Soul, there is actually a brand new card within Dragon Empire that uses Soul that might be in favor of this card to actually run it, because we've got a brand new Blitz order for Dragon Empire, which is this grade 2 Blitz order, Prayers That Will Reach Someday. And this order's ability is play this with cost, Soul Blast 1. If you have a rearguard with the Overdress ability, choose one of your units and it gets power plus 15k until the end of that battle. So now you might think to yourself, now hold on a moment, why does Dragon Empire get a 15k Blitz order with extra condition and a cost, whereas all the other nations get a free 20k Blitz order that only works for a specific archetype? In this case, it also only works for a specific archetype, aka the Overdress archetype. And on top of that, Dragon Empire already got a 15k Blitz order that isn't this restricted, so you might think to yourself, this is actually a worse version of that card. Now, to both cases, that's actually not the case, because in my opinion, this is actually better than the already present Blitz order in Dragon Empire, at least from the Overdress deck standpoint. Because the problem with that Blitz order is that it can only be used if you're at 3 or more damage. 15k shield has a lot of value in your first couple of turns, because if your opponent attacks with a Vanguard unboosted, that means with 15k shield, it's a no pass, or at the very least an over trigger to pass. So being able to use your 15k Blitz order in those earlier turns is actually very much important, because it gives you a lot of value from that shield. But sadly, because it has the restriction that you need to have 3 or more damage, you most likely will never be able to use it in the early game, because you won't have that damage when it matters. Whereas this new Blitz order is completely different. Yes, you need to have an Overdress unit on the board, but with Verena and Verena Arcs, it is much more commonplace that you will be able to use this on turn 2 than the other Blitz order. And yes, the Soul Blast might be an issue to some, but Soul isn't the resource that the Overdress deck actually uses a lot. As I explained, you only use one for the right line, and maybe you use the Verena retire option, but it's not that important for the archetype. I personally would definitely play this in my Overdress deck, as I can see more value behind this than what we already had with the other Blitz order. And on top of it, it doesn't specify a specific unit to be used, whereas the other 20k shield units can only be used on the specific Vanguard, whereas these can still block your rearguards, and in the Overdress deck, that might actually be still very important. And with that, we saw all the new reveals for the Card of the Day reveals this week. Overall, the general value of these cards aren't the most amazing. We have seen more spectacular cards, but there were a couple of outliers that had some interesting potential or told a very interesting story of potentially more support. For example, the new Brandgate card that allows you to retire the stuff in your prison. I'm very curious if that's going to be a whole playstyle where we're going to see more of cards that allow you to retire your stuff in the prison, because that gives a lot more options to the prison players to customize their deck and see more potential to that particular playstyle. But it goes without saying that this goes for all the other nations, as we see more interesting cards that might be tech choices, that might be new strategies, or that might just be flavorful extra addition to your deck. Overall, I'm very excited about these reveals, and I want to know in the comments down below what you guys think of these new cards and what do you plan to add to your specific lineup. With that said, that's everything for this Cardfight update. Join me next Tuesday when we take a look at the new cards they're going to reveal during the live stream, which are the new right line for Phantom Blaster Dragon and Dragonic Overlord. So it's bound to be a very exciting reveal day. This video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!